So welcome to today's session where we are going to be looking at understanding the breath. We're going to begin by settling into the space that we are sitting. I suggest you do sit rather than lie down for this. And it's always a good idea to not lean against any support of the chair or the wall or the couch. Just sit forwards on your chair if you do tend to slouch back, having the hips slightly above the knees. So whether you're sitting or on a chair or on the floor, just to have length and spine as well. And then you can gently close the eyes. If you prefer to have them open, then just soften your gaze and pick one point in front of you to look at. We're going to start with a few deeper breaths in and out. You can make these exhales audible to yourself. Perhaps breathing out of the mouth and then in through the nose if that's available. Otherwise, just through the mouth again. And so focusing consciously on these active breaths, audible breaths. When we hear ourselves breathing out, similar to a sigh, the brain registers relaxation. So this is a way that we can engage a little bit of the relaxation response in the body via the brain, via our breath. So just doing two more of those breaths. And then just coming to a natural breathing rhythm. And by natural, I'm referring to how your breath wants to be right now in this moment. And that's what we're going to observe. So I invite you to notice if your breath is relatively relaxed now, or whether it is slightly stressed. You'll know that in the speed of the breath. Now, the breath itself can't be stressed. The breath is giving us an indication to what's happening in the body and the mind. And for this practice, I invite you to merely observe rather than trying to change what you find. So again, noticing if the breath is slow and relaxed and deep, or if it is faster, sharper, and more shallow. Simply observing how your breath is right now. So observing how we are before we start any particular technique is the foundation of all breathing practices. We become conscious of the breath in the present moment as it is. So as you follow your inhales and your exhales, know that this is breath awareness practice. Simply observing, being aware specifically of the breath. Follow the inhales and follow the exhales. And now I invite you to try and find that space that is naturally there. It's the space between the out breath and the in breath. There is a very small pause where the breath turns from going out and then it comes in. Now again, without trying to change anything or without trying to create that pause, just observe that space of transition. So you're observing the out breath, the transition, and then the in breath. And just as there is that very small pause, the transition and turning point of the breath on the out, there is also that same pause on the in. Once you've taken the breath in without pausing, without trying to create it, just observe that there's a small space, small pause before the breath leaves the body again. So now you're observing the space between the inhale and the exhale. Again, we're not trying to create that or change the breath. We're merely just observing. And now we can add them together where you are observing the in-breath, the slight pause, the out-breath, and the slight pause. Seeing the breath as a continual circuit. Follow that rhythm in and out of the body now. So we can say that we are observing 4 parts to the breath cycle. The most obvious parts are the in-breath and then the out-breath, and the more subtle parts, the pauses at either side. And it might be helpful to visualize or feel this coming in and leaving the body in a circuit. So this breath that is continually cycling in and out. And from having 100% of your focused awareness now on that rhythm of your breath, shift part of your awareness to your posture. And observe now how your physical body is, how it feels. Observing specifically the base of your spine, where it connects to what you are sitting on. And very slowly taking that awareness from the base of your spine and just drawing it up the back of your body. Perhaps lengthening a little bit more in your posture if you found yourself slouching a bit. Drawing right up to the crown of your head and then holding your awareness just at the top of your head. Now keeping that length, which you may have shifted your posture into, just see if you can relax the muscles now in the shoulders and down the back, holding yourself balanced in your length, yet relaxed. And then taking your awareness to the lower jaw, to the points where it connects into the skull. And allow yourself to relax into those muscles there. Perhaps this means that that lower jaw just drops slightly. Perhaps the lips part a little bit. And perhaps the tongue rests in the mouth. Freeing up tension in these muscles will make it easier for us to breathe overall. And then another point of focus is around the brow area. You can think of your third eye or between your eyebrows if you prefer that. I invite you to think of this area unwrinkling, broadening, so that those frown lines just disappear as the skin stretches and relaxes, creating a sense of spaciousness around the brow. And allowing that spaciousness to drop down into the eyelids so that they just lightly touch if they're closed or settle if they're open. and the eyeballs as well, allowing the muscles around the eyeballs to soften. And coming back to the rhythm of your breath. Observing now how the lower abdomen, commonly referred to as the belly, naturally ebbs and flows when the body is in a state of relaxation. This is directly linked to the rhythm of the breath. And again, we're just going to observe what is here now as we breathe. Observing for yourself if there is a natural movement in the belly area, or if it is relatively tight and contained without the ebbing and flowing. Often just by taking our awareness down to our belly will shift us into being more natural in our breathing rhythm, which means that the belly will find its ebb and flow. As the breath comes in, the belly moves out. And as the breath leaves the body, the belly just softens back in towards the spine. And now with your awareness, noticing the cycle of your breath, the posture of your body, the length of the shape, your lengthened posture with relaxed muscles, and the ebbing and flowing of the belly area. Observing now how your mind is, if there are any emotions or thoughts. And it's from this space now that I invite you to set an intention for the rest of your day. And then you can take 2 deeper breaths, just breathing that intention in. And remaining as you are for a few more moments. I will signal coming out of this settling practice with the sound of the singing bowl 3 times. So until you hear that, just continue to follow your breath and sit with your intention. When you're feeling ready, you can gently blink the eyes open. And then moving slowly, perhaps changing your position or adding a stretch, rolling the shoulders back, or things like this, maybe even a twist, all really good to do after you've been sitting for a while, especially if you're going to do multiple sitting practices to focus on your breath or to focus on a mind training technique. What I introduced there was this idea of the breath being in 4 parts. So I'm going to show you a diagram in a moment, but in essence, what you have the experience of now, I'm going to give you the theory of. So we have, if you like to think of it in a box for now, you have your in breath. Let's go up for in breath, a little pause, out breath, and a little pause. So if I do that this side again, In, little pause, out, little pause. Now if I show you from the side, the breath's coming in. It turns in the nasal cavity. Exhale comes out. This is if I'm breathing in and out through the nose. Of course, it first goes into my lungs. We're going to look at that in a moment. But just to give you the idea of what's happening, breath comes in, small pause, breath goes out, small pause. So what's helped me over the years is to actually visualize this. If visualizations work for you, use that visualization of this circuit. Right, breath comes in, pauses, breath goes out. Now that pause is not really a pause as it is a transition. This is important to note when we are observing our breath. For breathwork practices, we first have to find the awareness of the breath. And then as we advance our learning of this, we can choose to harness those transitions and we can actually create a pause there. This is something that we learn later on. And specifically when we're engaging pranayama, which is a technique of breath holding to emphasize the life force, we look at this. But for now, most of the breathing practices are going to be focusing on the inhale and the exhale. And we're going to be manipulating either the inhale or the exhale, or the exhale or the inhale, or both. So that would kind of be a start into breathwork practice. First, we're aware of the breath, and then we start to manipulate for specific purpose, either the inhale or the exhale, or both. Later on, once we are more comfortable and stable within those practices, then we can add in the manipulation on those transitional points between inhale and exhale. We can then make those more of a pause. And later on, just so that you know what's going to come, you can actually bring in locks in the body. So these are certain muscles engaged in the body that also then have an energetic effect. Okay, so I like to talk about conscious breathing, this idea of breath awareness. Conscious breathing is basically anytime you are breathing and you bring your conscious awareness to the breath. So because the breath is automatic, we don't have to think about breathing. If we had to think about breathing and we forgot at any point in the day, we'd probably fall over and die, which is why it's part of the automatic nervous system or the autonomic nervous system. It's involuntary. We just breathe. You could say the body breathes. You could say the mind assists the body to breathe, which is wonderful. Now, when we bring our awareness to this, that's when it's conscious. We can then observe, like we did in this practice. It was a conscious breathing practice. We observed the inhale. We observed the exhale. And this is so subtle, yet so profound that it's often overlooked. There are many, many different techniques out there for breathwork training and for mind training. In my opinion, if the practitioner is not taught this foundation of breath awareness, just of conscious breathing, then building the house and the roof on top of that structure is not going to be sustainable. It's going to crumble very soon. Because when we can sit there in conscious breath awareness, it's a beautiful space also to empower ourselves and to know how to move forwards, i.e. in a formal practice session, we can notice if we're slightly agitated that day or if we're really lethargic. And then we can apply our breathing techniques accordingly. For example, if we're feeling slightly anxious, we could then bring in a breathing technique to lower the anxiety. So we'll bring in a relaxing, restorative breath. If we're feeling we're quite lethargic, on the other hand, we're not going to bring in a breathing technique to relax our central nervous system. We're going to bring in a breathing technique to enhance it. So if you apply the incorrect breathing technique at the inappropriate time, we're going to take on the central nervous system, and it's going to be a bit like a yo-yo. We're going to be, in a sense, messing around with it unnecessarily. And our nervous system is really important to keep at a relatively harmonious level. Throughout the day, we are going to experience anxiety, and we could argue that nowadays we're constantly living with anxiety as well. For many people, they might not be aware of it, but there's going to be an edge of anxiety underlying most things. So we got to know how to work with our breathing techniques so that we balance out anxiety and don't create more anxiety. So there's a very particular technique for a particular time, always. It's not just one size fits all or one technique fits all. Having said that, there are breathing techniques that are safe to use at any time. This is not going to take you too much into anxiety, or it's not going to take you too much into lethargy. It's going to bring you back to equilibrium. So you can think about breathing techniques in three main categories. That category that I said is not going to harm you or take you in the central nervous system too far out of balance, no matter when you do it, is the balancing category. This is going to be balancing out the energetic system and the central nervous system. Then you can have breathing techniques that are for relaxation, calming, and energetically they're cooling. And then on the opposite of that, you can have breathing techniques that are for energizing, for activation, and for increasing the heat or the fire energy in the system. Okay, so think of those three broad categories: the equilibrium in the center, the constant balancing out, and then there's the cooling, calming, relaxing techniques, and then there's the energizing, uplifting or enhancing and warming techniques. All right, so that speaks to the physical body, it speaks mentally to the mind as well, and then also for the energetic body. So no matter what level you are working at in terms of, is it physical, is it energetic, is it mental, these breathing techniques can be applied. So for some people, they'll want to work directly on the energetic system, other people only on the physical system, some people want to work with all three together, because what happens with the breath will happen in the mind and in the body. The breath is part of the energetic body. The energetic body, you can think of being the center point between the actual physical body and our mental, emotional space. So I'll just talk about bodies here. There's the energetic body, there's the physical body, then there's the mental body. The energy body connects both. It's the bridge. All right. The quickest and most accessible tool we have to work with our energy body is our breath, which is why every time we engage a breathing technique, it will have a physical and a mental response. This is really, really powerful. There's a lot of research done on the physical body, a lot of research done on the mental body. We could argue in Western science, not so much done on the energy body. However, in Eastern traditions and Eastern healing modalities, there's a large component here of the energy body. And this is not new information. This is old, ancient wisdom. But the energy body that we can access through our breath will have an impact on the physical body and the mental body. So our emotions, our mental health, our stress. And then we know physical body will also have its stresses, what will feel good, health, wellness, all of that comes together. We can access it directly through the breath. And this is really powerful. When we can start to access our breath as a tool for health and healing, it's very empowering. Very, very empowering. So I'd like to show you now some of those images I was mentioning. Let me just find them on my notes here. And while I'm doing this, I invite you to take a few deep breaths. All right, so just on the physical the physical body, we can see that every system relies on oxygen. And we are taking in oxygen when we breathe, of course. We have a few other gases that are in the air, that is in the air around us. But what our physical body is taking in when we breathe is the oxygen. When we breathe out, as a byproduct of respiration, which we'll look at in a moment, we are breathing out carbon dioxide. Now, this is nothing new for most of us. It's standard biology that we would have learned in school. But just to have a look again and a recap of this, every single system in our body needs oxygen. We can say our circulatory system affects every single other system in the body. So everything we do needs the breath, and it needs optimal breath. There's a few other scientific things that I'll get into in a moment, but I just want to take us back to the importance of this breath. We can go without water for a while. We can go without food for a while. But we cannot go for a very long time without our breath. And we can think of that. We can, there's these world records of people that are able to hold their breath for a certain amount of minutes at a time. Free diving, for example, is one of those sports where they have to practice actually holding the breath in. And they're not letting the mind go into a panic response when their body is responding to the toxicity buildup of carbon dioxide levels in the blood system. That's basically how we know to breathe out, to breathe in. It's the level of toxicity versus healthy amounts of carbon dioxide in our blood system. So our brain is registering that, which was that last image that I started to show you there. But without getting too sciencey about it, basically we just know we have an urge to breathe in and an urge to breathe out. And we can play around with this a little just to kind of see the impact in the body. If we had to hold our breaths in, I'm not saying do it now, but I'll just kind of give you the visual of what will happen. And this is maybe after a minute. I might start to go blue a little. Why? My circulation has been cut off. Eventually, I'm going to breathe out. Or what's going to happen is if I'm not breathing out to, again, equalize the energy through the breath, I'm going to faint. Now, that is a natural survival response that is very, very, very layered deep in our primitive brain. So we don't have to worry about, if I don't breathe properly, I'm going to die. Our body will make sure that if you're not breathing, you'll faint. And then what happens then is consciously you're knocked out, but involuntary, those systems will still kick in. Like your circulatory system just is there all the time. It's working for you. So is your digestion. So is everything else in the body. Largely, these systems are involuntary. We don't have to worry about it. We just have to stop controlling it. So when we hold our breath and we get into the point of this is becoming toxic for the circulatory system in the blood, and obviously then for the brain, and the brain's going to eventually get brain damage if we're not able to override that. Our brain just basically kunks us out. It punches us in the face, and we will yeah, that's the example anyways that I'm going to use for now. So then when we faint, we'll start to breathe again. The same thing happens if we hold the breath out. There's going to be, I can't even talk. I can't really give the example there of showing you what it's going to look like. But eventually there'll be this urge to breathe in. And that's within the space of seconds to minutes. And you'll know, you can go without food. There's fasting, there's certain fasting diets where you're not going to eat food for a few days. The same with water. But air and breath, you're not going to survive very long. So that just shows the importance versus everything else in our diet, all right, and how it's directly impacting on the physical body. We're going to talk a bit later on about how it affects our mental health. We're going to first have a look at physically what happens in the respiratory, as the respiratory system, and then also breathing versus respiration. So before we end this tutorial, Again, I just invite you to take your awareness to your breath. So that can be with the eyes opened or closed. It's a good idea every now and then just to practice in different ways so that when we are going out into our everyday life, we're not needing to remember to breathe deeply just by having our eyes closed and sitting. So perhaps right now, you could just look past your screen at whatever's in front of you and just taking some of your awareness into your body, to your breath. You can do this through the mouth, through the nose, or a combination. And just take 3 breaths, conscious breaths. You can make them deep, they can be shallow, but just be conscious to how your breath is. And your final breath like that before we end. Much gratitude for this breath that keeps us alive.